Greetings. I bring you a message this afternoon from Metropolitan Baptist Church. We're located on the corner of John Street and Jerusalem Road in the township of Scotch Plains. I'll be concluding our Black History presentation for the month of February 2021. Over the past month, I've changed who I thought I would present a number of times. We have a rich history. The accomplishments and the achievements of our people cannot be counted. I'm going to begin with a mini version of a story about an enslaved man and how he escaped to freedom. His name was Robert Smalls. It was in Charleston, South Carolina. The year was 1862, the second year of the Civil War, when a 23-year-old slave accomplished the unthinkable. He boldly seized a Confederate ship. A slave takes over the Confederate ship during the Civil War. No one could imagine this. Smalls commandeered the Planter, which was the name of the ship, and delivered it into the imposing fleet of Union ships that were anchored outside of Charleston's harbor. Charleston's harbor was one of the largest ports in the Confederacy. This port was the lifeline for the South. The Southerners depended on the imports that the ships carried. Some of what this particular ship carried were war materials. Massive supplies of guns, food, medicine, and other sorts of goods and supplies. In other words, it was the livelihood for the Southerners. Smalls' plan for escape was as dangerous as it was brilliant. In a nutshell, he seized the ship, disguised himself as the captain, used the secret code book and hand signals that were required by the captain of a ship to pass through the Confederate checkpoints. This is a slave. His courageous and ingenious act freed him, his family, and a number of other slaves. One question I initially asked myself was, where was the captain and the other mates for this to have taken place? It was this particular captain's practice, along with his crew, to leave the ship to spend time with their families. The thought of a slave taking over the ship, I'm sure, never crossed his mind. Smalls decided it was time to carry out his mission, a mission that required bravery, intelligence, and precision timing. And with that, mission accomplished. Following the war, Robert Smalls ends up owning the house he was born in as a slave, and he continued to push the boundaries of freedom. He became a politician, served in the South Carolina State Assembly and Senate, as well as 5 terms in the United States House of Representatives. Maya Angelou's poem came to my mind after I was reading this man's book, right? Oh Lord, Still I Rise came to my mind, a poem of liberation and survival. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may try me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I rise. Black history and why we celebrate it. A salute to Carter G. Woodson, also known as the father of Black history. Dr. Woodson was the second African American to receive a PhD from Harvard, second to W.E.B. Du Bois. It was in 1925 that the Harvard-trained historian and scholar had a bold idea. He announced that a celebration of people that many in this country believed had no place in history should be celebrated. First, we had Negro History Week about a century ago, and almost a half-century after that, the celebration expanded to Black History Month. For decades, the history narrative taught in our schools was that we had slavery, that only a few owned slaves, and that the practice was restricted to the South. So not the case. Unfortunately, most of our teachers don't have the knowledge to teach our history because they were educated in the United States education system. It is so very important that our story is told and told fully. Woodson felt that the contributions and accomplishments of blacks should be a 365-day endeavor. He wanted to improve race relations, and most importantly, he wanted to make sure our contributions were not erased from the country's history. Many marginalized people have had their full stories left out of our history. This is what is better known as systemic practices. When you have knowledge of your history, it changes your perception of yourself. I can remember my grandmother telling me, I am somebody. You gotta believe it. New Jersey has an Amistad Commission which provides system-wide training and resources for teaching Black history. The law was named after the ship called the Amistad, which was the name of a Spanish slave ship. They transported 53 Africans who they kidnapped from Eastern Africa and sold into slavery. This was in 1839. The slaves revolted, killing most of the crew, including the cook and the captain. New Jersey was the first state to pass this legislation, and that was in 2002. The commission spells out what students are expected to learn in each grade level. And just this past week, it came to my awareness that Cherry Hill School, that's Cherry Hill, New Jersey, the board voted 8-0 that students will be required to take a course in African American history in order to graduate. That's a good thing. This garnered national attention and could prompt other districts to follow. That would be progress. Now, in light of our recent historical vice presidential election, I would like to shine a light on a few of Howard University's notables. The prestigious Howard University has so many notables in so many different fields. I'll just mention a few. Howard is ranked second as it relates to the more than 100 HBCUs. I'll begin with Thurgood Marshall, the man. Attorney, self-rights activist, and Associate Justice of the Supreme Court. Marshall graduated with honors from Lincoln University, and after being rejected from the University of Maryland Law School because he was not white, he attended Howard University School of Law. He ranked first in his class. Marshall was the protege of Charles Hamilton Houston, who encouraged him and other law students to view the law as a vehicle for social change. After graduating Howard, Marshall began his private practice in Baltimore, and among his first legal victories was a suit accusing the University of Maryland of violating the 14th Amendment, guaranteeing of equal protection by the law by denying an admission to its law school solely on the basis of one's race. He won the case. In time, Thurgood was named chief of the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund and became better known as one of the country's top lawyers. He won 29 of his 32 cases that argued before the Supreme Court. My second notable of mention is Ralph Bunche, a political scientist, activist, academic, and diplomat who received the 1950 Nobel Peace Prize for his mediation in Israel. My God. He arranged a ceasefire between the Israelis and the Arabs, and he also was the first African American to be so honored. Then we have Charles Hamilton Houston, prominent attorney and NAACP's first litigation director, who played a role in dismantling the Jim Crow law. He was the dean of Howard University's law school. He helped train Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall. Houston was better known as the man who killed Jim Crow. He played a role in nearly every civil rights case before the Supreme Court. Brown versus Board of Education. That's a landmark decision of the Supreme Court. As far back as 1896, it was declared legal to segregate public accommodations and services throughout the United States. This was the Plessy versus Ferguson doctrine, better known as separate but equal. Excuse me. The Board of Education ruling started the process of ending segregation. It overturned a separate but equal decision. Brown versus Board of Education broke the back of segregation. Separate is not unequal. Whew. Howard's list is as long as it is impressive. Andrew Young, Elijah Cummings, L. Douglas Wilder, David Dinkins, Vernon Jordan, Toni Morrison, Paul Laurence Dunbar, Ossie Davis, Richard Smallwood, Chadwick Boseman, all among the extensive list of notables out of this university. And the last notable I'll mention is an American politician and attorney who has a lifetime of public service on her resume. She was a district attorney in San Francisco, California, attorney general, and senator, who is now serving as the vice president of these United States. She is the highest ranking female official in our history. First African American, first Asian American vice president, the one and only vice president, Kamala Harris. To God be the glory. This concludes our Black History presentations for the month of February in this 2021. I pray that God bless and keep each and every one of you.